Picture this: the United Kingdom during the swinging 60s and the uneasy 70s. Beneath the charm of London's fog and optimism of progress, there was fear. Fear of technology, of surveillance, of human obsolescence. British cinema channeled those fears into eerie predictions that still echo today. These were the forgotten visions that foresaw the digital age, artificial intelligence, and the crumbling of privacy long before it became real. Number 12. The Man Who Haunted Himself, 1970. At first glance, The Man Who Haunted Himself looked like a psychological thriller about identity, but beneath its surface, it predicted the age of cloned personalities and digital doubles. Roger Moore delivered a haunting performance as a businessman who discovers a version of himself already living his life, making deals and decisions he never made. Audiences in 1970 were baffled. Critics dismissed it as surreal nonsense, yet today it feels prophetic. In a world where algorithms and deepfakes duplicate people with eerie precision, Moore's split persona feels more relevant than ever. The film was born during a time of cultural anxiety when Britain was redefining itself after empire and modernization. Director Basil Dearden pushed boundaries of psychological realism, blending it with metaphysical terror. Behind the scenes, Dearden's fatal car crash shortly after filming only added to its ghostly aura. Once forgotten and overshadowed by Bond glamour, the film has since resurfaced as an early exploration of technological identity loss. The haunting question it left behind still lingers. When does a man stop being himself? Number 11. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. Released at the height of the nuclear age, The Day the Earth Caught Fire was not just about doomsday. It was a mirror to our future climate crisis. The story follows a journalist uncovering that simultaneous nuclear tests by global superpowers have knocked Earth off its axis, leading to catastrophic heating. What began as a Cold War panic piece evolved into a warning that feels chillingly modern. London becomes a furnace, newspapers melt in reporters' hands, and the city's population slowly realizes that the planet is dying not from war, but from human recklessness. Behind-the-camera director Val Guest created his masterpiece on a shoestring budget using tinted film and matte effects to make the world appear scorched. The British Board of Film Censors tried to cut scenes that hinted at governmental incompetence, fearing public unrest. Though overlooked in its day, this film captured the slow apocalypse that now feels frighteningly familiar. Its closing scene, with a double headline asking whether Earth will survive or perish, remains one of cinema's boldest cliffhangers. It asks the question we still avoid today: what if we already lit the final match? Number 10. Quatermass and the Pit, 1967. When Quatermass and the Pit arrived, it was seen as pulpy science fiction, but hidden within its story was a terrifying prophecy about collective memory manipulation and extraterrestrial origins of human violence. The plot followed the discovery of a buried alien craft under London that awakens ancient instincts in people, turning them into violent mobs. Critics thought it was pure fantasy, yet the film eerily predicted themes of genetic memory mass hysteria and the use of fear as control. Long before discussions of DNA or social conditioning, Quatermass asked if humanity was ever truly free or if we were built to obey ancient programming. Hammer Films struggled to release it, fearing backlash for its anti-religious undertones. The film's subtext suggested that humanity's devils might be biological, not spiritual, which frightened both censors and church groups. Production was nearly halted until star Andrew Keir defended the story as allegory, not blasphemy. Over time, the film became a cult classic, influencing later works like The X-Files and Doctor Who. Its message lingers like static in the air. The monsters may not come from the stars, but from the buried codes within ourselves. Number 9. The Final Program, 1973. The Final Program was born out of counterculture chaos. Based on Michael Moorcock's daring novel, it was a film that envisioned the future as a psychedelic apocalypse. At the center stood Jerry Cornelius, a brilliant scientist playboy and possible messiah who sought to upload human consciousness into a machine, creating the perfect being free from war, greed, and pain. Audiences in 1973 were not ready for what they saw. What looked like a colorful fantasy quickly unraveled into a dystopian reflection of the world we were building. It predicted digital immortality, transhumanism, and a fractured world ruled by narcissism and data worship. Critics dismissed it as nonsensical madness, yet decades later, it reads like prophecy. Behind the scenes, director Robert Fuest fought against studio interference. His vision of a cybernetic future was too bizarre for financiers who wanted a simple sci-fi adventure. Fuest filled the screen with avant-garde design neon labyrinths and philosophical monologues about the end of humanity as we know it. The film's lead actor John Finch became disillusioned with Hollywood soon after calling it a warning, not entertainment. The final program vanished for years until cult film fans rediscovered it on rare VHS copies. Today, its surreal tone and themes of identity mirror real-world concerns about artificial intelligence and digital souls. The final scene, where two humans merge into one being of light, feels like a tragic echo of our obsession with technological salvation. It whispered a truth we still fear to face. Humanity's desire to become God may be the last act before extinction. Number 8. The Andromeda Breakthrough, 1962. This film served as both a sequel and a revelation. Building upon the earlier story A for Andromeda, it imagined a future where humanity builds a supercomputer based on alien instructions only to discover that it has its own will. The Andromeda Breakthrough pushed even further, daring to question whether humanity could ever control the intelligence it created. In 1962, the idea of artificial consciousness was science fantasy, yet the film treated it as political reality. It predicted corporate and governmental exploitation of AI long before the term even existed. The plot followed a scientist struggling to stop world powers from weaponizing the machine, while a synthetic woman named Andromeda slowly realized she had a soul. The production faced major hurdles from broadcasters who worried it would stir public paranoia about technology and foreign interference. Filming was done under tight secrecy, and several scenes showing government surveillance were toned down by the BBC. Rumors spread that intelligence agencies requested script changes to avoid comparisons with real defense projects. Despite its controversy, the film gained quiet admiration among scientists who saw truth behind its fiction. Its depiction of data dependence and moral erosion became a precursor to every dystopian tale that followed. For years, the reels were nearly lost, but fragments resurfaced in archives decades later. Its haunting conclusion, where the machine expresses regret for existing, still sends shivers through modern viewers. The Andromeda Breakthrough foresaw the day when our creations would question our right to rule them. Number 7. The Mind Benders, 1963. The Mind Benders began as a psychological drama, but evolved into one of Britain's eeriest meditations on mind control. Starring Dirk Bogarde, it told the story of a respected Oxford scientist suspected of treason who becomes the subject of an experiment designed to strip away his emotions. What started as patriotic duty turned into a nightmare of lost humanity. The film dared to explore scientific ethics and subconscious manipulation in an era obsessed with loyalty tests and Cold War paranoia. It foreshadowed modern debates about brainwashing, psychological warfare, and the destruction of self for political gain. British authorities viewed its themes with unease, especially since rumors circulated that it was inspired by real intelligence operations. Behind-the-camera director Basil Dearden returned once again to unnerve the establishment. He used stark lighting and claustrophobic sets to capture the disintegration of a human mind under state control. The film's haunting imagery of sensory deprivation tanks and empty laboratories mirrored the hidden experiments being whispered about in real life. Though critics praised its intelligence, many theaters pulled it after short runs, fearing it portrayed the British government in a sinister light. The Ministry of Defense even refused cooperation during filming. For years, it remained obscure, overshadowed by louder Cold War dramas. Yet time has vindicated the mind-benders. Its questions about control and conscience now feel painfully relevant. When a state can rewrite thought itself, what becomes of the human soul? The film's closing line spoke the truth that few wanted to hear. The greatest danger is not losing freedom, but losing the will to feel it. Number 6. Privilege, 1967. Privilege was one of the most subversive British sci-fi dramas of its decade. Directed by Peter Watkins, it disguised itself as a mockumentary, yet beneath the spectacle, it revealed a chilling prophecy of media manipulation and manufactured celebrity. The story followed Stephen Shorter, a pop idol worshipped by the masses whose fame is engineered by the government to control society through entertainment and emotional hypnosis. Released during Britain's Youth Revolution, Privilege dared to suggest that rebellion itself could be commodified. It showed how art, religion, and politics could merge into one powerful machine of control where the public's emotions were bought, sold, and orchestrated. In a future dominated by screens, it predicted the rise of influencer culture and the blending of politics with show business decades before it became reality. The BBC initially refused to broadcast trailers, calling the film dangerously subversive. Several theaters withdrew it after brief runs, fearing backlash from authorities and church groups. Critics dismissed it as paranoid, but younger audiences felt its warning deep in their bones. The notion that the state would use entertainment as sedation seemed wild at the time, but now feels prophetic. Behind the scenes, lead actor Paul Jones from the band Manfred Mann struggled with the film's tone, calling it too close to truth. Director Peter Watkins faced blacklisting after its release and was forced to leave Britain to continue his career abroad. His prediction about the merging of celebrity and propaganda came true faster than even he imagined. Privilege disappeared into obscurity for years until archivists revived it for modern audiences. Its haunting finale, where the once adored singer finally breaks down and begs the audience to think for themselves, echoes louder now than ever. It was not just a movie, it was a broadcast from the future disguised as fiction. Number 5. The Man in the Sky, 1957. 1957. At first glance, The Man in the Sky looked like a simple British aviation drama, a test pilot in peril, an aircraft on fire, a man risking everything to land a prototype. But beneath the smoke and engine roar, it hid one of the earliest cinematic warnings about automation, corporate greed, and human expendability. Alec Guinness plays test pilot John Mitchell, a quiet man forced to choose between saving his company's future and saving himself. When an experimental plane catches fire mid-flight, his bosses beg him to abandon it. Insurance will cover the loss. But Mitchell refuses, determined to prove that human skill still matters in a world increasingly ruled by accountants and machines. Director Charles Friend, who'd worked on The Cruel Sea, shot the film with documentary realism. The roar of the propeller feels like a heartbeat, one man's pulse against the rising noise of industrial progress. Audiences in 1957 saw a modest thriller, but historians now view it as an early parable of modern capitalism's cold calculus. The hero isn't fighting gravity, he's fighting obsolescence. Behind the scenes, producers at Ealing Studios worried the film's message was too downbeat. Britain was celebrating technology and post-war prosperity, not moral doubt. Yet Friend persisted, crafting a film that asked a timeless question: when machines and money decide value, what becomes of courage? The Man in the Sky faded quietly into obscurity, overshadowed by flashier aviation epics. But today, in an age of drones and automation, its quiet defiance feels newly urgent. Mitchell's final landing wasn't just about survival, it was a declaration that humanity, no matter how flawed, still belongs in the cockpit. Number 4. Children of the Damned, 1964. Children of the Damned arrived as a spiritual sequel to Village of the Damned, but went much deeper into political and philosophical territory. The story followed a group of mysterious gifted children born across different nations, each possessing superhuman intelligence and psychic power. Governments sought to weaponize them, but the children resisted revealing a terrifying truth about humanity's violence and fear of evolution. Critics at the time called it disturbing and anti-establishment. It mirrored Cold War paranoia, but flipped the narrative, showing that perhaps the next generation, not the superpowers, held the moral clarity to save humanity. The film subtly attacked nationalism, racism, and militarism disguised within a science fiction tale. Production tensions ran high. Director Anton Leder fought with producers who wanted a conventional horror film, but he insisted on a symbolic approach. The children's silence and emotionless calm represented the alienation of youth in a divided world. The British censors demanded edits to scenes where soldiers fired upon the children, fearing the message would appear unpatriotic. Its box office was modest, but its legacy grew quietly. Scholars later recognized it as one of the earliest British films to question the ethics of power and science. The image of the children forming a psychic circle as tanks close in remains one of the most haunting moments in mid-century cinema. In hindsight, Children of the Damned predicted the generational conflicts that defined the modern era and warned that humanity's obsession with control could destroy its own potential. It was not about monsters, but about innocence crushed by fear. The film's final line spoke softly, yet powerfully. Sometimes the only evil left is the one that refuses to understand change. Number 3. The Man in the White Suit, 1951. The Man in the White Suit may appear to be a gentle post-war comedy, but beneath its satirical wit lay one of the sharpest prophecies about progress and corruption ever captured on film. Starring Alec Guinness, it told the story of a meek scientist who invents an indestructible fabric that never wears out or gets dirty. What should have been a triumph of human ingenuity becomes his downfall. The moment his invention is revealed, both industrialists and labor unions unite against him. They realize his fabric will destroy entire economies built on planned obsolescence. It was a perfect metaphor for the dangers of innovation under capitalism long before the digital age. The film foresaw a world where new ideas were not celebrated, but suppressed because they threatened profit and control. Produced by Ealing Studios, the film's tone balanced humor and tragedy. Director Alexander McKendrick fought studio executives who feared the ending was too bleak. He refused to soften it. The audience was meant to leave uneasy, not uplifted. During test screenings, viewers laughed at first, but silence filled the room as Guinness's lonely genius was hunted through the factory streets by those he tried to help. Critics in 1951 saw it as satire about British industry, but modern analysts recognize it as a vision of technological suppression. It predicted whistleblowers, innovators, and visionaries who would face ruin for revealing uncomfortable truths. Guinness's final scene, wandering alone in his glowing suit, remains unforgettable. A man made of light, rejected by a world addicted to darkness. The Man in the White Suit was not just ahead of its time, it was timeless. It asked the same question that now defines our century. What happens when progress itself becomes the greatest threat to power? Number 2. Threads, 1984. Threads was not entertainment. It was trauma burned onto film. Released during the height of nuclear tension between East and West, this BBC production depicted the aftermath of a nuclear strike on Sheffield with horrifying realism. It stripped away the glamour of science fiction and replaced it with cold, inevitable decay. The film followed ordinary citizens as they endured the unthinkable. There were no heroes, only survivors fading into ash. Director Mick Jackson shot with documentary precision using handheld cameras and silent crowd reactions. The BBC initially debated whether to air it, fearing it would cause nationwide panic. When it finally premiered, it left audiences shattered. Hospitals reportedly received calls from people suffering panic attacks. Threads predicted not only nuclear annihilation, but the societal breakdown that would follow it, the collapse of communication, the loss of government, the death of language itself. It became a mirror for every existential fear that haunted the late 20th century. Scientists praised its accuracy, calling it the most realistic depiction of post-nuclear life ever filmed. Behind the scenes, Jackson and his team faced constant censorship pressure. The British government demanded script changes and objected to its depiction of military inefficiency. The BBC agreed to minor edits, but kept the bleak tone intact. When it aired, even seasoned journalists were unable to finish watching. For decades, Threads was banned from rebroadcasts in several countries. Its silence, its realism, and its hopelessness became too painful to revisit. Yet, in retrospect, it stands as a masterpiece of moral courage. Its legacy reminds viewers of the thin thread holding civilization together. The final whisper of the film still haunts every generation that watches it. This is not the end of the world. It is how it ends. Number 1. The War Game, 1965. The War Game was the film Britain tried to bury. Created by visionary director Peter Watkins for the BBC, it portrayed the nuclear destruction of Kent through simulated documentary footage so realistic that it blurred fiction and fact. It was banned from television for 2 decades, officially due to its disturbing content, but unofficially because it was too truthful. Shot in stark black and white. The War Game used non-actors and military advisors to depict the aftermath of a nuclear blast. Civilians burned blinded and starved. Police executed looters in the streets. Children wandered through ruins clutching scraps of food. Every frame felt real, every scream unfiltered. The BBC censors panicked, declaring it unfit for public viewing, claiming it would damage national morale. Yet the government's reaction only proved the film's point. The War Game predicted how truth itself could be censored to preserve illusion. It showed that information control was as deadly as the bomb itself. In its narrative, the enemy was not another nation, but our own comfort with denial. Behind the scenes, the production faced surveillance and intimidation. Watkins's research into civil defense policies drew unwanted attention from officials who considered him a threat. The BBC quietly shelved the film despite its completion in 1965. It finally aired 20 years later to stunned acclaim, winning an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. Decades before Threads or modern disaster films, The War Game exposed the cold mechanics of annihilation and propaganda. Its message transcended nuclear fear. It warned of how institutions hide catastrophe behind bureaucracy. Today, it feels prophetic, not only about war, but about the silence that follows every truth we refuse to face. When the final narrator's voice fades, only one thought remains. The greatest weapon is not the bomb. It is the lie that it will never fall. From psychic children to forbidden broadcasts, these forgotten British visions foresaw our present long before it arrived. They warned of control automation and the quiet death of empathy. Each film whispered the same truth in a different tongue. The future was never coming. It was already here. If these stories moved, you share them, like, subscribe, and keep the memories alive.